Good afternoon. My name is Paul, and I'm a restoration ecologist with TRCA, and I'm out in the Meadoway. And so this is a newly seeded section of the Meadoway, and I'm out here, and we've got a trusty COVID sign, and we're doing social distancing. There's nobody actually out here right now, so that's nice. But if you see our sign and you see our people working out in the field, please just you can wave them down and go over and talk to them, but keep your social distance, and we're happy to answer any sort of questions that you might have. So what am I doing out in the middle of this field? I have a newly seeded section of the Meadoway, and we're doing a bunch of different experiments out here. So the different things that we're doing out here are, because this was prepared last year, we prepared the field all year last year, and took it down to bare soil and repeatedly put in a cover crop to reduce the amount of weedy species and the invasive species that we have out here. And we also wanted to look at different seeding techniques, and so we've developed a number of different seeding techniques, and so we're going to look at those. And we've done a number of different experiments where we're looking at the germination rates and different timing of seeding. So we seeded in the spring, actually in the fall, the winter, and the spring. So we seeded at different times, and we're looking at the germination rates and seeing if we get better success at different times of year. We're also developed a whole bunch of different seed mixes, looking at how the meadow can have more diversity in the different seed mixes by adding different types of seed mixes for different types of habitat. So we have dry seed mixes, we have both a wildflower seed mix, and we have a more grass seed mix, and we have wet meadow seed mixes. We have a very short mix which we put around the towers. We have also a resilient mix that we're using, which is a seed mix that we're using in areas that have a lot of invasive species, and so we want to have the strongest, most resilient species to combat the invasive species, to hold the ground, and to come in quickly. So, and the other thing that we're looking at is nurse crops. So we're looking at the seeding rate of different nurse crops, and out here, I don't know if you can see in the background there, we've got some millet. So I'm just going to flip this around. Where'd it go? There we go. So over here we have millet in these different areas, and we're also trying with oats, which is our standard mix that we're using. And then we have some other areas with millet. So we're just trying these different seed mixes, these different nurse crops, and we're trying to see how these different nurse crops hold the soil, hold the moisture in the soil, especially this year with the heavy drought that we had. We just came through, we just got a nice rain on the weekend, and so everything's nice and moist and greening up again. They were looking rather sad last week. And so we're just looking at these different nurse crops in this area. And over here, you can see, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see there's little different strips going along here. This area was seeded with the tall grass mix. And in the experiment, this is an experimental area where we're looking at seeding in the fall, and then we're seeding in the winter, frost seeding, and we're also seeding earlier in the spring. So just trying different things out to see how the seed works and see if we can get better germination and faster establishment, because some of the other sections we weren't seeing quite as fast establishment, and the wildflowers weren't coming up quite as fast as we would like them. A lot of them were staying dormant for the first year because they didn't have enough stratification, and so they weren't really flowering until the second year and coming up. So we work with a lot of different partners. We have Cicely out here, and she's working with the University of Toronto doing bee biodiversity, so we have different collaborations We have Ke, which is working with Dr. Drake from the University of Toronto as well, and she's looking at soils and hydrology, and hydrology, which is water movement in the soil and the water holding capacity of the soil. And she's looking at how the edge, which is more turf, and the meadow have different water holding capacities and different soil characteristics, like for climate change, where hopefully we're finding that the prairie species, the meadow species, are holding more moisture and holding more carbon into the soil. So that study's going on as well. And so I'm just going to show you a quick look at my map. Just going to lay this out kind of a little clearer spot. So here we are, and over here, so this is how it's oriented. So this side we have a number of different treatments. So this is our fall seeding is this color, sort of an orangey color, and then our spring seeding is green, and our winter seeding is blue. So we have 3 replicates, which is an experimental design, and 3 replicates of our 3 different treatments. So we have 9 different plots, and so we have replicates so that we are repeating the experiment again and again, and you'll see that they're not all side by side, they're randomized so that it makes it more easier to compare. Whereas if it was all the plots were together, you might have one effect in the field, a little bit moisture over here and a little dry over here, and you would miss that result. You would suddenly say, oh, this moisture part is the one that had the best result. So you want a randomized design so that you eliminate some of those variables. And so we're working with the hypothesis that our null hypothesis, which is our neutral hypothesis, the one that we can test, is that there's no difference between any of these. And then we're trying to see, okay, is there a difference between seeding in the fall, the winter, and the spring? So that's the test area that we're going to look at. And the second, here's some sun. The second test area we've got here is looking at this area in darker blue is millet, and this area over here is the area for oats. And so we're doing different treatments, 25, 75, 100%, and 0 is our no treatment at all. So it's what we call our control. And so we're just comparing how the different levels of oats and millet affect the germination of the meadow mix, and also the holding the moisture into the soil, which was important for this drought, and for suppressing invasive species, and for just holding the soil. It's an important thing for our neighbors and for erosion control. So let's take a look. I'm crinkling a bit here. So let's go over to our experimental plot. So this is the edge of our experimental plot. And as you can see over here, we've got our different markers that are marking our different treatments. And then over here, you can see like this area here would have been a spring seeded area. And then this area over here, because the reason I say that is because the oats, there's a lot more oats in this area. And the oats was seeded in the spring, and so it didn't die. Whereas this area over here, because we were seeding it with the oats at the same time, when it was seeded in the fall, the oats actually died over winter, so we're not getting any oats in this area. But we're seeing a lot of wildflowers. So we're seeing black-eyed Susan coming up. And what else we got? Let's take a look. We've got a lot of black-eyed Susan, which is nice. And we've got a little bit of evening primrose. So there's different things in here. And we have things like Queen Anne's lace coming up, which is not native, but you can see there's a fair bit in here. It's a biennial, so it won't last too long. It will slowly disappear from our meadow, so we're not too worried about that species. And then, need the sun. This is oxeye, which is just starting to flower. So you can see we're getting a fair number of species coming up, and this is actually more of a grass area, so you're seeing different grasses. Oh, that's the millet. Let's see over here where it's a little clearer. Some of the grasses coming up in different spots. And then if you look over here, this is our spring seeded plot, and you can see there's some oxeye here, some black-eyed Susan, and there's some things like ragweed. So this is the one that this is the one that causes you the allergies, which is ragweed. So it's kind of innocuous. You can't really notice it too much. It's green, has green flowers. So everybody thinks it's goldenrod, but it has bright, nice yellow flowers, but it's actually not. And so in these experimental plots, you can see we're transitioning over into a more spring area. And also we have some of these monitoring plots out here, which I wanted to mention. So these are monitoring plots set up by our monitoring group at TRCA, and they come out every year, and they take these plots through what's called a modified EMAN plot, and they put these quadrats here, and they come back every year and they measure all the different species that are within these plots, and they're seeing what different species are on the ground. It doesn't look too exciting. There's a lot of clover here, and there's a little bit of, this is oxeye, which is nice. A lot of different clovers. So we try to leave the monitoring plots alone so that we can get results. And those monitoring plots are expected to happen year after year. So what we're monitoring for is the changes over time. So we're hoping to see changes in biodiversity over time, seeing more and more biodiversity. So that's what we hope to see. And over here, it's a little bit more of a wet pocket, and so we're actually finding a little more diversity over here. So here we already got oxeye flowering. We've got black-eyed Susan again, a little bit more evening primrose. We've got some common milkweed, and we have some, this is nice, showy tick trefoil. So this is a little bit more damp patch. The water's come into this spot. So just having that variability in the field. And so this would have been a winter seeded area because there's no oats in it that have survived the winter. And again over here, this is the spring seeded. So that's just a quick look at that experimental plot. And then over here, and as you can see, there's some goldfinches going. We had a bunch of bull thistle here, and the guys came along and pulled those out so that they wouldn't be a problem in the meadow. But you can see the goldfinches really love it, and they're eating those seed. I'm just going to walk over towards these plots, but you can see, I don't know how well you can see it, but there they are. This one's pretty shy, not very shy. I'll let you eat. And I'm just going to go over to the millet plot here. And so as you can see, we've got different treatments, different concentrations of millet. So here's what we call our control. So there's no millet in this plot. And as you can see, there's a fair bit of, there's oxeye here, black-eyed Susan. There's some of this prairie grass is actually coming up quite nicely, starting, it may even flower. So things are looking not too bad in our control. And our area on the side there is the treatment that we normally do. So we're using millet on this side of the field. So this area of the field is actually all grass. So this is a grass mix on this side of the field, and we have about 70% grasses and 30% wildflowers in this area, just to add some more diversity to the different plots. That's one of our seed mixes. And you can see the millet on the side. That's the regular concentration. It's about 50% of the agricultural rate. And why we have that is so that the native species can come up through the millet. And it looks fairly dense here, but as you come closer you can see it's not super dense in between the plants. And you can see there's a black-eyed Susan coming up. And there's some of our prairie grasses down there. So they're nice and happy growing here at the base of the plants, and there's good space in between, so it allows them to grow. So that's what we're looking at with these plots. And so I'm just going to quickly walk through this area, and it's going from a lighter, so you can see it's sparse in this area, the millet, and then as we move across the field, gradually it's getting more and more dense as it gets closer to 100% of the agricultural rate. So we're just trying to figure out, okay, what is the ideal rate for seeding the millet and the oats? And if we have this, figure out what the ideal seeding rate is, then we'll start using that more. And then again, we're back into our oats over here, and you can see this is much more sparse. And then as you move across the field, you can see our seeding lines down here. See, this is our prairie grasses, and we've used a drill so you can see the lines going along there. This line, we got two lines here, two lines going across here. So this is how far it goes when it's seeded with a drill. And the drill just puts a small depression in and then drops the seed and then packs it down again. And then looking over here, we're gradually getting a little more dense in the oats. And so we're still seeing a lot of our prairie grasses over here. Again, this is our grass mix on this side. So there's less wildflower in there, and gradually it's getting thicker and thicker in the oats. So those are some of our experiments over here that I just wanted to show you. And so the results on these, we're not completely sure yet, because my observation, thinking that, oh yes, this is one concentration of oats versus another concentration of oats is better, is much different. We want to get the monitoring crew out here, and they'll do 1 meter by 1 meter plots, probably 3 for each of the treatments, and then we can do a bit of a linear regression on the oats and the millet, and we can do some different statistical analysis on the different seeding times, so that we can get an understanding of what is the best rate and what is the best application time. And then I'm just going to take a walk across here, and maybe I can get see some of the questions. Where are the questions? So I'm just walking across the experimental field again, and you can see some of the wildflowers coming up. Oh, and there's some monarchs fighting a bit, so they're already using this as habitat. Oh, there's one right there. Very nice. And then we have our millet. So this is our regular treatment of millet with our grass seed mix. So we're just getting a couple of questions. If you have any questions coming, I'm just going to walk across, and I want to really show you the other side of the field, which is our wildflower treatment plots using the same experimental design, seeding in the winter and seeding in the spring. But it's a bit of a hike across here. So why do we use oats as your cover crop? Well, that's one of the questions that we're trying to figure out. We're using oats and we're using millet this year, and we're trying to figure out, okay, which is the better. And earlier, I don't see them right now, but this field had a whole, the millets just coming into seed, and so there was a whole flock of different birds that were coming in and out of that field. So I like the millet because it stays short. It dies over winter. The oats also dies over winter. So when you put it down in this year, it will actually die. So what happens is the prairie species actually have extremely deep root system, and so the prairie grasses, especially, and the prairie wildflowers go down several meters. They send the roots several meters deep into the soil, which allows them to withstand drought times like we had this year. And so they're not actually doing a lot of top growth in the first year, so they're actually putting all their energy into the roots. So what happens with that is, because they're not putting a lot of top growth on, it leaves the space open for invasive species to get in and weedy species to get in. So what we're doing with the nurse crop is putting that down and mixing it in with the wildflower and the grass mixes, so that we have time in the first year. It's holding that space, it's holding the moisture into the soil, while the prairie grasses and the prairie wildflowers put their roots deep into the soil. And then the oats and the millet will die over winter, and then hopefully by the second year the prairie and wildflowers and grasses will be strong enough that they can hold their own, and they'll take up more space and hold the site better, so that when the invasive species start to germinate, that they can actually push them out. So we're manipulating the ecosystem a little bit to allow, to bias it towards the native species. So we're doing a bunch of different techniques to try to figure out, okay, how can we change the system a little bit so that we're pushing it towards our meadow species, and then that allows the native species to thrive, and we don't have to do as much maintenance later on, which is a big component of what we do. And so here we are. We walked across the field, and as you can see, here's our markers for our other plot section. And what I'd really like to show you here is just like how many wildflowers we've got over here. And so these plots, you can see this is the spring seeded section. So you can see the oats here were seeded mixed in with that. And there's some wildflowers here, but not a lot. But then you walk over the line, and this is winter seeded. So you can see that we've got quite a diversity of different species here. We've got hoary vervain. Right beside it, we've got some oxeye. And it's flowering in the first year, which isn't very usual. And we've got evening primrose, which usually flowers in the second year because it's a biennial. And we have blue vervain, again another perennial that doesn't usually flower in the first year, but because we've done a seeding in the winter, now they're seeding now, setting out flowers now. And you can see, oop, a pollinator just ran away. And we've got oxeye here flowering. So you can just see, like, look at that, all the colors that we've got out here. And that's just the first year. So this was seeded in the winter, and now we've got all this growth out here, all these different species, and it's looking great. So I'm just walking through here, and so you can see again what we've got, and then you have a fairly distinct line. So this is the difference. Here's your spring, or your winter, sorry, seeded, and then this is your spring seeded, where the oats lived, because we didn't put them through the winter. That's where they would freeze. And you can see there's not as much wildflower. There is some. They're not as far along. You can see this is the rosette of the evening primrose. It'll flower next year. And here's the oxeye. It might flower this year. There's the black-eyed season. So they've come up, but they're not coming up anywhere near what they're coming up in the winter seeded. So that's just an idea of what we're doing out here. You can see we've got our different plots. You see the long view of the meadoway. So we're working with very large areas. Oh, there's the birds. Nice. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a huge flock of birds right there. Oh, coming my way. Very nice. Nice little murmur. So they're all utilizing this meadow already. And you can see we're in the middle. We're not in the middle of nowhere. We're out in the middle of the meadoway. And we have other questions here. Why are the wildflowers and grasses so small compared to the established meadows? Well, it takes a long time for these guys to grow. I was just talking to you about how much energy it takes for the plants from the first year. They put all their energy into putting deep roots down. So you can see here's some of these prairie grasses down here. Little ones down here, probably Indian grass. So you can see they're not getting very tall, but what's happening is they're going deep into the ground, so that when next year there's a drought, they can survive that. Whereas the weedy species won't have that advantage. Most of our turf grasses only go down a foot into the ground, whereas these are going down several meters. So let's see. So I think this gives you a bit of an overview of what we're trying to do out here. If there's anybody out there that's interested in doing other research, we'd be happy to collaborate. There's so many opportunities out here. We have large areas that we've seeded. We've got multiple years of seeding, and we've got different seed treatments, different seed mixes. So yeah, if anybody wants to do any other research, we're already working with the University of Toronto, but we'd love to do more research out here. There's a lot of opportunities. Please contact us. So I just wanted to say thank you for joining us out here. I really appreciate that everybody's come out to see what sort of research we're doing out here on the Meadoway, and we'll continue to refine our techniques and get the best meadow we've got out here. Thank you very much.